So you want to get into cybersecurity, right? Maybe find your very first bug? Well, you're in exactly the right spot. Today, we're going to zero in on how to find one of the most common and, honestly, most beginner-friendly security bugs out there.
Right, so that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you actually go from knowing nothing to finding that first real-world vulnerability? The answer is probably simpler than you think.
You do it by checking the digital locks. Seriously, you just test the doors and windows of a website to see if someone forgot to lock up properly.
And that simple idea, well, that leads us perfectly into why this is the perfect place for a beginner to start.
Okay, so why start with this thing called access control? Well, it's got some huge advantages. First off, it's not super technical. It's way more about logic and just sticking with it than it is about deep coding knowledge. You also don't need any fancy, expensive tools. And here's the best part. Automated scanners are terrible at finding these kinds of bugs. That gives you, a human with a brain, a massive advantage.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Security researcher Insider PhD was asked what bug a beginner should look for. The answer? Access control issues 150%. I mean, you can't really get a stronger recommendation than that.
All right, so we know why we should be looking for them, but what exactly is access control? Let's break it down. Honestly, the concept is super straightforward. Just think of access control as all the keys and locks for a website. It's the whole system that's supposed to make sure only the right people can get to specific things. So, broken access control? That's just when the door is unlocked and you don't even need a key to get in.
Now, this key system comes in a few different flavors. You've got role-based access, where your permissions are based on your title, like being a moderator. Then there's discretionary access, which is like when you share a cloud document with a specific friend's email. And finally, you have attribute-based, which is a more complex mix. The main thing to remember is this: the more complex these systems get, the more likely it is a developer made a little mistake somewhere.
Okay, let's zoom in on one very specific and incredibly common type of access control flaw. It's called an IDOR. IDOR. It stands for Insecure Direct Object Reference. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is really, really simple. It's a bug where a website lets you ask for something directly, like a user profile or a private message, without properly checking if you're the person who's actually supposed to see it. Here's the classic example. User A logs in and asks for their own document, which has an ID of 1,000. The system checks, confirms it belongs to them, and sends it over. All good. But then user A gets a little clever. They modify that request, changing the ID from 1,000 to 1,002. A vulnerable system doesn't recheck who owns that document. It just grabs document 1002, which belongs to user B, and sends it straight to user A. That's an IDOR. Simple as that.
So, where do you find these vulnerable IDs? Well, once you start looking, you'll see them everywhere. They can be at the end of a URL, in a parameter after a question mark, hidden in form data, or even in what are called API requests. Basically, anytime you see a number that seems to be identifying something specific, it's worth a closer look.
All right, that's enough theory. Let's get to the fun part, the practical, actionable stuff. How can you actually hunt for these bugs yourself?
This is the core method, and it is incredibly powerful. The two-account test. Here's how it works. First, you create two separate accounts. Let's call them Account A and Account B. Then, you log in as Account A, and just do something simple, like update your profile. Using your browser's developer tools, you capture the request your computer sent to the server. Now here's the magic. Every logged-in user has a unique identifier called a cookie. You're going to take the request from Account A, but swap out its cookie and put Account B's cookie in. Then you resend it. The final step is to check, did the profile for Account A change? If it did, congratulations. You just proved you can control one user's account while logged in as another. You found a bug.
Okay, this part is absolutely crucial. So if you swap in B's cookie and the action happens to Account B's profile, that's not a bug. That's just the expected behavior. You're just acting as user B. The vulnerability, the actual bug, exists only when the action happens to the original account, Account A. That's the proof that the access control check is totally broken.
Now let's see what this looks like in the real world. This is a story that shows just how impactful these simple logic bugs can be.
So a researcher was testing a social media platform and came across a video that was marked as private. According to the rules, they shouldn't have been able to see it or interact with it in any way, shape, or form.
Now, the good news for the site was that the access controls correctly stopped the researcher from editing the video, but the bad news was that a different access control check failed, allowing them to view all of the video's private metadata. Its title, its description, its tags. Even just leaking information is a valuable find.
And the reward for finding that simple, logic-based information disclosure? $500. It's a perfect example of how focusing on, should I be able to see this, can have a real-world payoff.
So, as we wrap up, this all leads to your first challenge. And here's the main takeaway. The most powerful tool you have when starting out isn't some piece of software or a complex script. It's your own brain asking that one fundamental question over and over again. Wait a minute, should this user be allowed to do that?
Remember that two-account test? Your first big find could be as simple as changing one number in a URL. It's out there, waiting. The only question is, are you ready to start checking the locks?